Okay, yeah, there just simply isn't enough space for me to do this.
So, if like me you used to be a degenerate gacha gamer, you may have already heard the news about what happened with Taimanin RPG Extasy, which is the global release of Taimanin RPG, which is a kinda not safe for work game with a safe for work version, and for this new global version, they kinda remade the game with some of the elements changed and released it as a family-friendly version on both Steam as well as mobile, and they released a separate Source version as well. And for those of you who have been following the channel for a while, you might remember from the time that I made the Illusion video as well as the other game industry related videos that I'm someone who has worked both in adult game companies in the past as well as someone who still works in game companies in general now, and that in the past I also did work on live service ops of many of these. That said, unlike those previous times where I was largely talking about all of it as someone who worked within the industry and who also worked on very similar styles of games in the past, this time around I actually managed to reach out to some insiders who not only worked within Infobrain, but who worked on this very project itself as well. That said, if you're wondering how I managed to get a hold of these people to get deeper insight into this project, well, I'm not gonna say that this might have been the company I worked in the past, because of the fact that some of the stuff I'll be talking about here may seem a little inflammatory, and I don't want to burn that bridge unnecessarily. So for all intents and purposes, let's just say I somehow got a hold of their emails by sheer happenstance. Though that said, after looking at all the stuff that was provided to me as well as all the things that they were telling me about the project, all I can say is that yeah, this very strange controversy they found themselves in, I'm not really too surprised that it happened. In fact, I'm actually kind of surprised that it took this long for something like this to happen. Although to be fair, the game has had multiple issues up till this point upon its release. And so today I'm here to the best of my abilities at least, talk to you guys about how this specific issue happened and why some of the other issues that have been going on with the game are the way they are, and why it might take a while for the company to fix them. No, I'm not gonna say that the game is gonna die or that this game is never gonna get fixed, because obviously, you know, when it comes to companies like this, they have a lot of people, they can change up the team, there's a lot of things they can do to implement, to change it in the future to make it better. But at the very least, I would like to highlight all the issues with the team and why this has resulted in the game being the quality it is right now. But before we get into all of that, let me just give a quick introduction of the game as well as the IP that it is based off of, for those of you who do not know what this is and you clicked on it. That said, if you are below the age of 18 or 21, depending on your country's laws with like NSFW stuff, click the mute button on the video now. I will leave this piece of text here. When this text goes away, you can just like unmute the video. Although maybe I should have said that before I told you to mute the video. Go on. Do it. Have you done it? Hey. Hey. If you're underaged. You suck. Aw. Did I hurt your feelings? Well, at least now I know that you didn't turn off the video like you did, so maybe you should have. Go on. Do it. You better have done it. Okay, let's get into the introduction itself. So, Taimanin is a series of very anti-Irish, Kuma adult games. Although in recent years, this has started to change. The titles which were created back in the day, which were largely visual novel titles, strangely enough, actually left a very big impact on the Kuma world. Like many of the kinks and weird plays that appeared in this series of visual novels actually ended up making it into mainstream Kuma stuff, or are still there hanging along the periphery even to this day. Like a lot of it, this was the origin point, and also the suits that were initially used, and that it's been used like fan art by many Kuma and SFW artists here and there as well. That said, we're done with the explanation, so you can click off the mute button now if you're underage. I don't know why I'm saying that before I even like remove the text from the screen, but you can click it off now. We're moving into the issue that arose this time around, which is largely safe for work in and of itself, aside from the fact that the players themselves are getting cucked by the production company, as well as the issues boiling under the seams that would have led to this situation, as well as the many other technical issues with the game in the first place. Mate, I can't see shit. So for those of you who do not know what happened with this game, because you're neither a Kuma nor a degenerate gambler, which saying that makes it sound like I'm kind of both. But no, okay, look, what happened was essentially the amount of gems, the premium currency used to roll in the gacha that you will get from the bond level up increases within the game, were apparently set at a level way higher than intended. So instead of getting the 100 gems at level 4, you were getting 500, and instead of getting 250 at level 5, you're getting 1000. So 5 times more and 4 times more. The issue of this is that with this game, 500 is the amount you needed for a single 10 pool. So you were basically being able to, for each character that you maxed out, roll the gacha another 310 pool more times, which basically means that you have a much higher chance to get the characters that you want as compared to if it had been set correctly. Now the thing is that like day one issues with gacha game on release is not really something too new. Many companies screw up, and that in and of itself, I guess it's kind of fine since it's a live service game. Maybe there was just some stuff they didn't keep track of too well. But the big issue with this game was the fact that they responded to this by basically putting their players into gem depth. And the way they did this was that the next few times you get gems, you essentially would get nothing instead, and instead it will be deducted from this gem depth until it reaches 0, at which point you would be basically cleared of your debt and be able to get more gems. So yeah, if you apparently manage to get like say 6,000 gems during this initial period because of this setting error, you would basically be put into a 6,000 gem cuck zone where essentially the next few times that you gain like free premium currency or that is given out by the company itself, you would get nothing until this has been dealt with somehow. To the players, this is not even like something that they thought they were doing wrong. It's not like people were going around exploiting a bug in the game that they knew was a bug to get ahead. Rather, this was something that they thought was an intended feature and were playing the game normally with the understanding that they weren't doing anything wrong. Now, I don't think I need to explain to you why this didn't go over well with the player base, because of the fact that this essentially was just punishing the players for a mistake of the developer. And the thing is that usually, when it comes to stuff like this at this point, with how competitive the whole market of gacha games is, like the market is getting saturated. More and more people are wasting their money on Genshin Impact instead. There isn't really much money nor time left to go around for a lot of the other games as well. Obviously, you do have very successful titles once in a while, but you tend to have more titles coming out and failing, and not even getting the light of day than those that come out and become a breakout success. And so typically developers tend to err on the side of caution and tend to be more friendly with the way they treat their players as a result. However, with this, they just chose the worst possible timeline of all to deal with the issue. And well, the reason why it ended up like this is due to, in part, much bigger issues that are going on within the company and the way it operates itself. So as the reasons why this specific issue popped up, according to the insiders I spoke to, the answer is twofold. The first of which is due to the fact that the initial coding of the game as well as the values that you see there were actually outsourced to a separate company who were given different values much earlier in the development process. The issue is that because of a lot of mismanagement that happened within the company, those people were not given the right values when they were coding the game, and then there was just some weird contractual issues that happened that caused them to essentially be dropped from the development of the game 7 or 8 months before it actually completed its development. And so the people who picked it up within the company itself, which were basically just like 3 or 4 people at the time, didn't really manage to check through everything, and they didn't actually hire a QA team, neither externally nor within the company, to like vet and make sure everything was right and according to spec. The second issue kind of links back to the first one, which is the fact that aside from it being outsourced, there was that level of incompetence that was happening within the company itself as well. Like, there were many issues, especially with this team as well, that caused it to become quite a shit show, according to the developers I know who worked on this project. For one thing, in spite of the fact that this game was initially given a 2-year span to complete this remake, apparently most of the work only really began at the 1-year mark, and most of it was only finally developed and starting to be put into the game to actually test out to see if the features were workable, if the gameplay even would be sound, within the last 6 months of the game's development cycle. And the reason why this happens was due to the fact that the initial head of the project was actually heavily incompetent, and most of the stuff only started to run within the last 6 months due to the fact that he was replaced by someone from the original Taimanin RPG team, who was then put in to oversee the development phase to the very end, although he's not working on the actual live ops of this game, it would seem. And the issue is that because of how incompetent the previous lead was, There was this very big issue within the team of everyone not knowing what everyone else was doing and having no clear systems to keep track of any of that either. In terms of the documentation for like the specifications of the game as well, most of it apparently that was uploaded to the company's drive was also outdated, so no one knew for sure what the actual finalized specifications of the game were meant to be. And some of the stuff, literally one guy would think this is correct and produce parts of the game using these numbers, only to be told later on that no, that's wrong. That has been changed like 6 months ago. There was also a lot of issues with like certain systems being rushed, people being under high pressure, or in some cases under no pressure at all, because essentially that previously it had the time perception of someone who had been stuck in stasis for 5,000 years. He didn't seem to have a grasp of how long any of the tasks that he wanted people to complete would take to actually be completed in a proper state. So sometimes he will give people a task that required only 1 day to complete, not give them a deadline. And when they asked him for a deadline, he would say you have 3 weeks to complete that. Meanwhile, someone else who was given a specification that would take about a month or 2 to complete, because it was a much bigger and more important thing, they were apparently only given 2 weeks to complete it. So there was a lot of rush going on, and so some stuff ended up also being very haphazard because of the fact that this lead not only was very incompetent at giving out tasks or understanding what his job was, but he was also really heavily stubborn. Like when someone told him stuff like, hey, this thing isn't gonna work out, or that system doesn't make sense, he would essentially just ghost them. And they would have to like add him multiple times on chat just to get him giving them a one-word response or deflecting the question altogether. So apparently as a result, many very weird mishmash of stuff actually ended up in the game the way it did, which essentially led to a culture of many people in the team just like switching off and just zoning out from the project itself, because they realized that none of their opinions would get heard and there wasn't really much that they could change at that point, because the leader as well as the person directly below him, both of them were basically this type of person who wasn't gonna take anyone else's opinion at all. And so they just decided to like just go through the motions and push through everything and wait for the next project to come instead, rather than just continue to try to push in this project when nothing seems like it would ever change. Which is why if you played the game and you have been wondering why stuff like the skill tree for the commander is such an old-fashioned giant mess, it's due to the fact that the lead of the team, was just a very old-fashioned and stubborn person who refused to accept any other opinions on what could have been a better way of presenting that tree, as well as a better way to make the tree itself feel more meaningful, instead of just having like 90% of the nodes be just like random small stat gains, and only a few of the bigger nodes being like the actual skills which would have been interesting. Because yeah, a very traditional boomer who had no concept of UI or UX was essentially put in charge of confirming what the UI and UX would be, without actually taking in the opinions of anyone else that wasn't himself. Also, when it comes to the localization, apparently there was a lot of issues there. Like most of what you see in the game now was also apparently completed in the last 6 months of the game's development through massive overtime, due to the fact that the initial production of it was apparently botched up massively. Like I was told what the reason was, but according to the insiders, this was something that they were told off the record, and so they would rather I not disclose it. But suffice to say, like the best I can say is that there was a very major botch up with the initial localization. This was spotted by the development team, not the localization team, in the last 6 months. And then the localization team essentially scrambled and panicked because they realized that the development team was doing their translation work for them, because of the fact that everything had been botched up prior to that and needed to be fixed ASAP. And so they basically scrambled in, redid everything for a third time, and then tried to do it all before release, and basically caused massive overtime as well. Also, there were some people online who are wondering like, well, why didn't they just roll back this first week anyway? This was a week prior to some of the other versions of the game releasing, so they could just roll it back and compensate the players, or do something else instead of putting them into a death trap like this. And from what I know, working on mobile games in the past as well, as from what I've heard from insiders when it comes to the management tools used for this game, it really might have just been due to a technical limitation, due to the ways that they have set up the management tools that would have otherwise had allowed them to take a more refined action to deal with this whole gem issue, which is the fact that when it comes to companies like this, and not only this specific game, but many other mobile games that are being produced in Japan as well, the management tools which are used to maintain these games basically to do everything from adding in the data of new characters, settling player compensation, and even stuff like changing up the stats and variables of enemies within dungeons. All of this is largely being done through a generic browser engine which has been used since like 20 years ago. So apparently for this title as well, it was using something very similar. Like if you were expecting them to have a dedicated app on their PC or a program or something they use, nah, they just log into something on their browser and do most of it from there. So the amount of stuff that they can do is typically very limited since they're using something that's very generic, and then getting programmers to add in more features as they go forward when necessary. And so when it comes to this specific issue, it very well might be that they just did not have a way to actually settle this in a more refined manner due to the fact that their own tools were not built for the job that they had set it up to deal with. And the thing with that many of the more generic like browser-based tools is the fact that the ability to roll back stuff is typically not programmed directly into the tool itself, so it would take a few programmers quite a bit of time to actually like revert the game to its original state a week ago, especially if the state that the game was in that week back was not saved, which yeah, come to think of it, even the titles I worked on in the past that were much bigger, like titles that had like more than 2 million active daily users, even games like those didn't actually keep like records of the older states that the game was in back then. So it really might be a case that they just have no way to do it whatsoever because they just blindsidedly did all of this without thinking about the potential issue of something like this happening. But yeah, it's due to all of these issues that I feel like many of the problems with the game that are currently existing aside from this one controversy will take a while to get fixed. Stuff like the PvP issue as well, where apparently the defensive team that you set is kind of bugged still. That would probably take a while due to the fact that the entire PvP system was initially outsourced to that other company as well. And then only one person in the current team within the company actually has any idea on how to actually do anything with that code because most of the other people in the team were not involved in any of that. So scrambling to fix all of that is probably going to take them a while. That said, do I think that this game is going to die really quickly as a result of all of these issues? Probably not. I mean, in spite of the fact they have lost a lot of user confidence due to all of the trust issues that they have caused within the game, at the same time, this is also a title that doesn't really require a lot of maintenance on their part to add new content to, because all they really need to do is to add the content from the Japanese version into this game and translate it and rebalance the stats slightly to make it fit with their current title, and that's about it. In fact, from what I remember from what the insider told me, like much of the content has already been planned in advance, and with the fact that they have 5 years worth of backlog to go through, it would take a long time for that issue to pop up, so they have just decided to delay thinking about that till whenever that comes up, if it ever comes up. But yeah, this might take a little while, especially when you consider the fact that Infobrain has for the longest of time been a visual novel company. They don't exactly have the most amount of competence or understanding of the mobile game industry, nor of making games with high levels of gameplay. Look, I'm not saying this to shit on visual novels or something like that, like going like, you playing games with no gameplay. No, this is not that, okay? As someone who has worked on those in the past as well, I'm literally just telling you that like the skill set that is required to create a visual novel is to some extent not as transferable from a gameplay perspective to many other forms of games. Granted, visual novels tend to have very well developed stories, and that can be fully transferred over to a gacha game, but when it comes to creating a game with a very high level of decision making within its gameplay, like say creating even something as simple as an RPG game, for example, most of what you learn creating visual novels in terms of gameplay balance and systems is not gonna transfer over very well. And so there is just this level of growing pains that the company has to go through to develop all of these newer titles. Of course, you might then say, oh, but they created Action Taimanin in the past. Shh, that was outsourced to a different company apparently, so that company has created the title and then gone their separate ways. The company itself that owns and manages the game now, like the Taimanin RPG and like Infobrain itself, yeah, you don't really have people within the company who have developed like games with heavy gameplay elements with them before, and so it might take them a little while to get there. I mean, from what I heard, many of the more veteran, especially the international staff, have left the company due to the fact that the many people at the top of the company especially are very, like I mentioned before, incompetent and stubborn. And then this is also a result of some of the much bigger issues within Japan with how it hires and promotes people in general, and how staff who are senior within the company are seen and treated, and how they treat the people around them and all that. Like there's this very big overarching issue which we could go into in another video because of how much that is going on there. But suffice to say that because of all of the issues regarding this and the people who are put at the top basically being people who have no experience with the type of games the company wants to make, but who have an ego because of the fact that they have created many successful titles that arguably don't have that many transferable skills over, they tend to churn their lower rung staff quite a bit as well. So that would be an issue in terms of like developing the appropriate talent who can develop all of these newer titles that they want to work on. But eventually we might see that change happen if they start to promote people in a more meritocratic way as well. I hope they do better, since they are one that has finding a way to put this that is family friendly is a little tough, huh? Well, suffice to say, there have been many people who have enjoyed their works in the past, so it would be nice to see this company, which has a fair base of fans, doing well, just so that the people who enjoy their titles can have something to look forward to. But yeah, that's all I really have to say for this video. I don't want it to be too long. Just so you know, this isn't a weekly uploads channel, nor is it a current events channel. Just that sometimes there's like current event stuff that I know a bit more about and that I want to talk about. Just crop up and I just create videos in a way that kind of messes up my schedule and makes it seem like I upload weekly, but that's not the case. Typically I would like to keep like spaces in the week where I just don't upload for a week or maybe two, just so that I can work on other videos. But yeah, so we're keeping this short. I'm going to end it off here for today. Thank you all for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, do feel free to leave a like and subscribe. I don't make game related videos all the time. Sometimes I talk about events in Japan as well, so if you like that, you can give that a check out as well. Or maybe if you like very shitty games that aren't this game, you can also go and check out my series on these worst games that were ever produced in Japan. I'm still working on some of those. The next video, it should come out next week. I hope I can finish it in time. I sincerely do, but we'll have to see, cause this coming up in the middle means I have less time to work on that. So hopefully everything goes well. If not, the next videos will get pushed back by 1 week, but yeah, videos should themselves be released. The 3 that I have set on the schedule on Discord, I mean. Oh yeah, we do have a Discord, so if you want to see what I'm working on in the future, especially in the coming month that we're in right now, you can see it there alongside my stream schedule, so do feel free to check that out as well if you're interested. That said, I'll be heading off now because this suit is very hot even in autumn, so take care and bye-bye.